G'day there. Are you someone who's new to board games? Are you someone who's in that sweet spot zone of having discovered this amazing hobby as you've just lifted the lid to a treasure chest and seen all the potential board gaming experiences that lie ahead in front of you? Well, you've come to the right place, because this is a place where we talk about how to get into board games and unpack some of the terms that sometimes makes getting into the hobby a little bit more challenging. In this video, we're going to be talking about how birds, vehicles, and marbles are related. In a board game sense. Well, actually, in an engine building board game sense. Dude, start the engine. I'm so ready for game night tonight. Hold on a sec while I find the key. When I first ventured out and explored this amazing hobby, I kind of felt like I was wandering through the wilderness without a map, without a compass, without any direction. I had my backpack with me, I had my sleeping bag and maybe some food, but really discovering the games that sort of clicked with me or games that really piqued my interest was kind of a little bit of a gamble actually. Just because a game looks a certain way or appears a certain way didn't mean that that game actually was that particular way. The way a game felt was very different to the way the game looked. And that often confused me and made me feel really conflicted inside. I kind of describe discovering games these days as kind of like going through the forest, wandering down a path that piques your interest and seeing a cool view from that particular perspective and going, I might wander a little bit further down this path and see where that view leads me. One of the biggest hurdles I found in modern board gaming is the terminology, the language used to describe games. Even the idea of a mechanism, which I often related to vehicles or machines or cars, were actively being used to describe games and how games worked. And that was just a big hurdle for me to get over. I just couldn't really wrap my head around what a board game mechanism was. And when people throw terms like engine building around, I think, I'm no mechanic. I know I've played a little bit of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, but that does not qualify me to be an engineer of any sort. And so some of those terms definitely clouded my way through this path into this hobby. Some delicious hot tea to play with my board games. Pomegranate flavor, in fact. So you might be wondering, what do birds and engines have in common? And how do birds play into this idea of engine building? Well, there's this one beautiful game that I can definitely recommend that is a really highly thematic Euro called Wingspan that ties these two elements together. And you might think, isn't that an incredible juxtaposition of concepts and ideas where they don't really ever get associated together unless you're talking maybe about like metal birds that fly in the air like planes. But in this game, the engine building really works superbly well. And I'm going to use Wingspan as a way to explain how you actually craft and build an engine in a game. What's really fascinating about Wingspan is that your player boards are basically the area where you build out your tableau, your rows of actions and your rows of effects. Throughout the game, you're going to be choosing one of these 4 actions, and if you're choosing one of these 3 actions, whatever cards are in your row, if they've got this brown banding to it, you'll actually get to trigger every effect that has that brown banding on it, moving from right all the way over to the left. And whilst I've left this row empty because I'm using this to demonstrate how it's all going to work, you'll see that as you progressively build out each row, your actions become more powerful, they become more connected, and the magnitude of the resources that you get is really going to increase exponentially. So if you're building an engine in real life, you need to know all of the components that go into it. And each component in your engine is going to have a particular function and a particular purpose. In Wingspan, they're in the form of these bird cards. Each bird card has a brown power, and knowing how those brown powers work, synergize, and combo together is really crucial for helping you to build a cool bird engine. I'm going to use this now to show you how to build a simple engine just in this grasslands row of this Wingspan board. Placing cards like this out early in the game, where once you play it, obviously paying its costs and satisfying its conditions. Every time you take this particular lay eggs bird action, it's going to trigger this action below, which will allow you to lay 1 egg on it. The next card I'm going to place is this red-winged parrot. And what it allows me to do is that every time I take this lay eggs action, I can give 1 nectar from my supply to another player, and if I do, I can either lay 2 eggs on this bird or gain 2 dice from the bird feeder, which is particularly powerful because if I use this action, I can lay 2 eggs, I can give away 1 of my nectar, and you'll see that the next card I'm going to play here is going to help with this bird, and I can have this flexibility of laying extra eggs or gaining extra resources to obviously invest into other birds. And not only that, I get this bonus of laying an egg again. On a future turn, I might play this Eastern Rosella, which actually synergizes and combos with this red-winged parrot, because when activated, all players gain 1 nectar from the supply, and I also gain 1 grain from the supply too. So not only do I get the wild resource, but I also get this specific resource here. But what's really cool is that this plays off this, and by having it in this particular sequence, I can use the nectar acquired from this Eastern Rosella, and I can use it to pay for the effect of this red-winged parrot without having to lose anything from my actual pool. And so whilst all of this sounds relatively interesting, creative, and intuitive, you might be sitting there thinking, well, if you're a competitive player, where does the competition really come into this if you're doing your own thing? And this is quite characteristic of a lot of Euros, where you are essentially doing your own thing in your own space, which is sometimes a good thing. But the competition comes down to who can be the most efficient at putting the pieces of the engine together, who can churn out the most resources and then reinvest those resources to create the most victory points ever. So you might be wondering whether there's actually board games out there that have you literally building an engine as part of the board game. And there is one game that is highly ranked in my personal board game collection that I absolutely love, and I know the hubby loves this too. It's a game where you're drafting engine parts, piecing them together to build the wackiest vehicle possible, and then you race them around the Swiss Alps. It is a beautiful game called Steampunk Rally. Now, I wonder where the key is to start this engine so I can get back to the studio. Steampunk Rally is a beloved favorite of mine. In fact, it was the second board game that I'd ever purchased when I started this hobby over 8 years ago, and it's still a game that's really close to my heart. What I really love about this game is its ingenuity. The fact that each card is multifunctional, you can use it to build your actual vehicle and expand it, but then you're ultimately using the benefits and the bonuses of each of those cards to fuel that smooth action that you need to race along this racetrack, which is really a gauge of how efficient you are. And what I really like about this game is the use of the different types of dice. You can power certain engine parts with electric dice or fire dice or steam dice, and sometimes using one type of elemental dice will churn out other types of dice that you can use for other parts of your machine. The game really challenges you to use the numbers of the dice efficiently, because as you vent the dice and remove them off your machine, you can then place future dice that you acquire. And there's a cool system of resource management and visual vehicle building that I really am allured by. Look at this glorious monster of a machine that I've built. It's so cool. The idea that I can use fire dice to generate blue dice, which I can then use the blue dice in my blast pipe to then get these effects to ping off a red, a blue, and a electric dice, and also by breaking a shield. I can also use blue dice to power some rough movement, but also gain an electric die, which I can use elsewhere on my machine. When one thinks of the term engine building, it's usually associated with something mechanical. But in a modern board gaming context, engine building could mean anything. It could mean nature, flourishing, growth, thriving in a functioning ecosystem. One of my favorite engine building games that has hit the market is a game called Earth, and it's basically Wingspan 2.0 with a more plant-focused theme. In this game, players are choosing from one of 4 actions, and what's beautiful about Earth is the fact that you're going to get something on every single player's turn. If you're the active player, you'll get a bigger benefit. If you are the other players, you'll get a smaller version of that benefit. And what I really particularly like about this game is the fact that everything is centered around growth. You're either going to be producing a lot of resources that you can use to reinvest in other cards or different synergies and grow plants on your tableau, or you can actually just play around and tinker with the different actions of the cards and see what sort of strategies really come together. The positive interaction of Earth means that this game has a very satisfying feeling to it. No one is left behind and no one is left feeling like, oh, I can't really do anything, because there's always something that you're going to be able to do. This game is similar to Wingspan in the fact that you have a tableau that triggers. In Wingspan, you trigger each row based on the particular action that you choose. But in Earth, you actually trigger your entire array of cards from left to right, from top to bottom. By being able to trigger your tableau multiple times, you'll end up with so many different soils, you'll end up with lots of compost cards, you'll end up with beautiful trees that grow and flourish and thrive off the table. And then you've simply got some engine building games that has you losing your marbles, quite literally actually. Gizmos is an engine building game that uses these energy marbles as a resource. What's really cool about Gizmos is the fact that what really starts out as a game where you think, different resources can be used to build different gizmo parts, and the gizmo parts are leveled based on their complexity, power, and effects. So you got level 1, level 2, with the highest gizmos being level 3, which essentially cost a lot more to build, but the effects that they provide and the victory points they provide at the end of the game are far more significant. But what really incentivizes players to build a cool engine in Gizmos is the fact that there are cards in this game that allow you to convert between different resource elements. And this is a key component to a lot of engine building games. The game invites ways for players to break, mend, scoot around, maneuver, and meld the game rules in their favor. So I might have a card that literally requires a blue energy to build, but it gives me the power to convert a red energy marble into any other energy that I want. And having that ability to interchange between the different resources means that the game essentially opens up and the flexibility to do more things becomes far easier. And what feels really restrictive at the beginning of the game really releases itself and becomes a lot more open. And Gizmos is also a game that is full of chain reactions. When you pick a marble or take a particular action, all of the particular gizmos that you've attached to that particular column in your lab board really fire off one after the other. And engine building can actually exist in a variety of different forms. In particular, Revive is a game that dabbles in engine building by allowing you to unlock sections of your board. So at the beginning of the game, there are a lot of different parts of your board that are covered up, which provides you with limited resources, limited actions, and limited parameters for what you can do. But as you do further actions in the game and lift some of the discs and reveal some of the bonus spots on your player board, you actually increase the expanse of what you can actually do on your turn. So the cool thing here is, as you move your discs along these 3 colored tracks, you can actually add little bonus tiles that give you bonus abilities that you can trigger. And as you unlock further things by moving your marker along, you'll be able to place these little tiles on there. Later on, you'll be able to use your energy to activate these bonuses, and then these bonuses can be also reoccurring. Now, as you get further along the game, you can take off these discs, which then get placed on the side of your board, which then determines how many points you'll score near the end of the game. What's also interesting is in this game, you can customize your board by deciding what sort of microchips go on the side. And these colors are really important because when you play certain cards in that spot, whichever color card you play is going to trigger those bonuses as well. So there's a type of color matching synergy here that you want to vie for, and the bottom action would take effect. You can slide at the top of your board, and the top card of the action will trigger these effects. And your player board has these little mini tech tracks where you can place your workers out onto the map and then unlock certain pathways that give you particular bonus abilities. So what you ultimately see in these sorts of games is that the success of a player comes down to the type of tinkering and engine building that they engage in. If someone is able to find a way to use the discs and the actions to synergize them in a way that helps them progress further and more quickly, then that player is going to feel really rewarded at the end of the game. And one thing I really like to do when I play engine building games is simply step back and appreciate my my opponent's engine. If I see that my friend or opponent has developed something that's really cool and creative, I'm like, oh, what made you lead you down that path? How did you discover that cool combo, and how did you make those triggers really work in such a cool way? So what did you think of those engine building board games? I hope this video helped to explain the term engine building a little bit more clearly and pique your interest in some of the engine building board games that you could add to your own board game collection. Let me know what are some of your favorite engine building games and write them in the comment section below. Thanks once again for joining me for another Board Game Sanctuary video. If you really like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and also head over to my Patreon page. And there are a whole plethora of other beginner board game videos on my main page. Don't forget to check them out. And thank you to all the patrons that are currently supporting me. I really appreciate it from my heart. Thank you.